Paris as one of the world's most famous landmarks reopens. The occasion was celebrated by dancing after the tower's longest closure since World War II. Pandemic pandemonium. A new analysis from the CDC raising alarm. Concerns the coronavirus may have infected 10 times more people than initially reported. Many states fear the situation could be getting out of hand. Texas halts all phases of reopening as hospitals there are running out of ICU beds. While safety measures like masks have been politicized, Florida's governor faces pressure as the state's cases continue to surge. Meanwhile, New York's governor cracks down on enforcing quarantine for visitors from hot zones. And new questions for President Trump after it was revealed it's been weeks since he's spoken to task force members. The president participating in a town hall today with audience members required to wear masks. As the race for the White House heats up, former Vice President Biden now calling the president a child as polls show Biden in the lead. We have 5:38 here to break down those numbers. Existential crisis in Hong Kong.
I'm prepared to be arrested, but then to talk about imprisonment, I'm not sure whether I am well prepared for that or not.
A generation fighting for its future while China tightens its grip on the territory. We'll take you behind the protests as democracy hangs by a thread. Posthumous payments. The head-scratching revelation from Washington that the Treasury sent more than $1 billion in stimulus checks to 1 million dead people. And dropping Dixie, why the country supergroup is now just called the Chicks. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Texas is called the Lone Star State for good reason. A reminder of its former status, albeit brief, of its own independent republic in the early 1800s. And that independent streak certainly remains strong still today. There is an old saying that you can tell a Texan, but you can't tell them much. But today it was the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, telling his residents that he's hitting the pause button on the state's reopening plans. One of the first states to get back to business is now holding off on the next phase as new COVID-19 cases rise across Texas. Nearly 6,000 new cases today alone, and hospitalizations reach a new record. That pause comes in Texas as the economic hits just keep on coming nationwide. Nearly 1.5 million Americans filed for unemployment claims last week. That's the 14th week in a row of more than 1 million claims, with the health of the economy so directly tied to the spread of the coronavirus. And the CDC is now warning that antibody testing suggests 10 times more Americans may actually have been infected with the virus than the more than 2.4 million Americans who have tested positive. Tom Yamas leads us off tonight, again from Texas.
Tonight, a major reversal in one of the first states to open back up. Texas now hitting the brakes on the next phase of reopening. The state's governor refusing to lock down, saying this move is about saving lives and livelihoods, declaring in a statement, the last thing we want to do as a state is go backwards and close down businesses. But Texas is one of 5 states reporting a record number of hospitalizations, more than 4,300 on Wednesday, up a staggering 190% since Memorial Day. One of those patients, Betty Reyes, diagnosed with COVID-19 while pregnant.
In November, I was 4 months pregnant and I had a miscarriage. So the first thing that came to my mind was my baby.
Reyes fell severely ill. The CDC now warning that pregnant women may have a higher risk. But luckily, she received a plasma treatment at Memorial Hermann Hospital that may have helped her beat the virus. She had this message for her doctor.
He's probably watching this. What would you tell him?
That you saved my life and my baby's life.
You know, there's probably a lot of women like you who, are pregnant. What would you tell them?
I was telling them if they get it, don't give up. Think about your baby. Be strong for your baby, because I feel like that the COVID will drain your body, like if you let it.
The virus is spreading fast throughout this state, infecting 18 members of the Barbosa family in North Texas after they attended a surprise birthday party.
My dad's hanging on by a thread. They're in there by themselves with no family, and it's just heartbreaking.
For the Rodriguez family outside of Houston, no one has to tell them how deadly this virus is. 3 members dying in 10 days.
I was doing everything I could to keep my parents, my father, alive. and it just it wasn't enough.
In Houston, even helicopters are being used to transport COVID-19 patients that are critically ill. This life flight chopper sterilized with a robotic UV device. The staff on board telling us about these difficult missions.
The patients that we are transporting are some of the sickest of the sick COVID patients that are out there. These patients are on ventilators. They've been paralyzed with medication.
Across the country, a record-breaking day in the worst way. Nearly 39,000 new infections in the past 24 hours. Numbers not seen since the peak of this pandemic. And tonight, the CDC warning the actual number of coronavirus cases may be 10 times higher than reported.
Our best estimate right now is that for every case that was reported, there actually were 10 other infections.
The CDC estimating 20 million Americans may have been infected, 6% of the country, and that more than 90% of the population is still susceptible to the virus. Around the country, other hotspots still growing. For the second day in a row, more than 5,000 new cases reported in Florida. The governor now saying he never said when the state would move to the next phase of reopening.
Where we are. I mean, I'm not taking, I didn't say we're going to go on to the next phase. We've done a step-by-step approach.
And Tom Llamas joins us again from Texas tonight. Tom, I want to return to that major headline today from the CDC that millions more Americans may have been infected than we initially thought. Tell us more about that and how that squares up with the situation that you're seeing on the ground there.
You know, I think it's alarming. I think a lot of people, both regular citizens just like us and healthcare professionals, are alarmed by that. They got that estimate from antibody studies all across this country, and they're saying in some cases, Lindsay, there was asymptomatic illness up to 80% in some groups. It's just more proof why we have to remain vigilant, why this is far from over, why so many want us wearing masks. You don't know who has it. The person next to you could have it, and it's just more and more evidence that COVID-19 is here to stay, at least for right now.
Must remain vigilant. Tom Llamas, thanks so much for your reporting. And as COVID-19 cases continue to rise in several states, another fight is also heating up over what may be one of the most effective weapons we have against fighting the virus. Scientists and public health officials say wearing masks can drastically reduce transmission of COVID-19, but many people around the country are refusing to wear them. ABC's Victor Oquendo has more on that.
With the virus spreading like wildfire, a battle is raging over one of the key tools used to fight it, face masks. Starting today in Palm Beach County, Florida, masks are mandatory, but the backlash was swift.
The fact of the matter is, it's our bodies, it's our choice whether we're going to wear them, not wear them. You guys are overstepping your boundaries 100%.
It is a scamdemic.
California now requiring masks in public after heated anti-mask protests like this one in Orange County.
Are you going to allow the government to tell you you have to wear a mask?
And in Arizona, where hospitals are treating a record number of COVID patients, a protest against the new mask rule in Scottsdale.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
This councilman sparking outrage after he appeared to mock the final words of George Floyd and Eric Garner. The governor calling it despicable, the councilman later apologizing. But doctors are urging Americans to use masks, especially when social distancing isn't possible.
Yeah, masks are an absolutely critical component to really ending this pandemic.
And more people appeared to be wearing them. A new ABC News Ipsos poll shows 89% of Americans who left their home in the last week say they've worn a face covering, compared to 55% in early April. But after scenes like these played out across the country, the challenge is getting guests to follow the rules, like at this Miami Beach hotel.
We're constantly trying to get everybody to wear a mask. It's not easy.
It hasn't been easy to get people to wear a mask?
No, they're not interested.
For much of the country, a patchwork of rules. Just 18 states now require masks, at least for businesses. A new model from the University of Washington suggests that some 33,000 lives could be saved by October 1st if nearly everyone wears a mask.
And Victor Oquendo joins us now from Florida. Victor, just a little while ago, the city of Miami took new drastic action to try to get people to wear masks. So what's the latest?
Lindsay, they just passed an emergency order requiring masks in public at all times. If you don't wear one at first, they will give you a warning and then provide you with a mask. If you don't wear one a second time, that's a $50 fine. If you don't wear one third time, that's a $500 fine. But again, it's confusing. That's the city of Miami. I'm here on Miami Beach where the rules are a little bit different. That has been the real problem here as you look at the entire state of Florida. The rules on masks almost vary zip code to zip code.
We often compare these masks to safety devices like seat belts, but masks can actually protect more than just the person wearing them. So is the flip side also true? Are these people putting others in danger by refusing to wear a mask?
You know, Lindsay, the bottom line is from every doctor, health expert, infectious disease specialist that we've spoken to, it's clear masks make a difference. Our own Dr. Jen Ashton on Instagram today said, if you don't like a mask, you're really going to hate a ventilator. Lindsay?
That's a good comparison there. Okay, Victor Akindo, thanks so much. And now to the race for the White House. President Trump in the swing state of Wisconsin today as his standing in the polls appears to be sliding in several battleground states. Meanwhile, Joe Biden talked health care with voters in Pennsylvania. The former vice president unleashed his harshest criticism yet of the president's leadership on tackling the coronavirus. ABC's Mary Bruce has this story.
President Trump in battleground Wisconsin today, eager to turn the page from the coronavirus, even as cases are surging.
We've done an incredible, historic job.
But his rival Joe Biden today warning Trump can't ignore the reality of this pandemic.
We're going to be dealing with this for a long time. Trump can't wish it away. He can't bend it to meet his political wishes. There are no miracles coming.
The former vice president ripped into Trump for complaining that more testing reveals a higher infection rate.
Here's what I say. Testing is a double-edged sword.
He thinks that finding out that more Americans are sick will make him look bad. That's what he's worried about. He's worried about looking bad.
Biden using his harshest language yet.
He's like a child who can't believe this has happened to him. All his whining and self-pity. Well, this pandemic didn't happen to him. It happened to all of us. And his job isn't to whine about it. His job is to do something about it, to lead.
Trump is facing a health crisis and also an economic one. He has promised a third round of stimulus to help Americans through, but no plan yet. And today, new questions about how his administration handled the last round of payments. The Government Accountability Office reporting the Treasury Department sent checks to more than 1 million dead people, $1.4 billion misspent. People like Eleanor Burns, who died more than a year ago, but still received money. Her son, Jim, has been trying to send it back.
The government still has not cashed the check yet.
The president's handling of the pandemic is taking a toll on him politically. Biden leads in one poll after another, including a new one showing him up 14 points nationally.
And Mary Bruce joins us now. And Mary, as you said, this was Biden's strongest language yet on the president and the coronavirus, including taking him on over reviving the economy.
Yeah, and Lindsay, remember, this is what the president is staking his re-election on, that the country can move past coronavirus and that he can promise a comeback of the economy. Now, Joe Biden took him to task on that, saying that the president is essentially ignoring what he said was a basic fact, that in order to get the economy back up and running, well, you have to tackle the virus first. And we know the former vice president certainly doesn't think that the president is doing that right now.
The president also participated in a Fox News town hall in Wisconsin this afternoon. Now, the audience was all required to wear a mask, but what about the president?
No surprise here, Lindsay. The president once again is not wearing a mask. The visual, though, of this is really striking because Fox News, of course, is requiring everyone in the audience to do so. And yet again, we see President Trump flouting the recommended guidelines here. He has not worn a mask in public, and it's very clear that he is not going to start doing so anytime soon. And we have seen this over and over again this week, even as the president has been out there speaking to large crowds, even as he's visiting states where cases of coronavirus are on the rise.
Mary Bruce, thanks so much for your reporting, as always. And joining us now, someone who knows a thing or two about preparing for pandemics, President Obama's Ebola czar and current Joe Biden advisor, Ronald McClain. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Lindsay.
So when we last talked more than 2 months ago, you told us that the virus has the power to decide what's open and what's closed. Today, as we speak, are you concerned about the direction the country is headed? And how could this surge have been prevented?
Well, of course, I think we should all be concerned. We saw a record number of cases in America today and the potential for this to even get worse. And look, how could it have been prevented? It could have been prevented if President Trump had done the right things from the start, which was to expand testing, not criticize testing or try to reduce it, to match the testing with contact tracing to isolate chains of transmission, to promote mask wearing and other practices to keep us all safe. This isn't hypothetical, Lindsay. You know, in Europe, they had the same peak number of cases that we had. They're now down to 4,000 cases a day. We're at 40,000 cases a day. They did the right things. We did the wrong things.
What's your number one piece of advice for governors in states where they're seeing a surge in cases right now?
Well, I think the number one piece of advice is they need to make sure their healthcare system is ready to deal with it. Again, President Trump's sent little or no help to places like Texas, to places like Florida, places that are seeing a real strain on their capacity. That's the real danger here. It's not just deaths due to COVID. It's that hospitals get overwhelmed, people don't get treatment for other ailments as well. We're seeing emergency rooms, ICUs, at the breaking point in some of these states. The federal government should be constructing emergency hospitals, emergency capacity in these states quickly so we make sure they don't get past the breaking point. Then they have to make sure they're ramping up testing. President Trump announced we're going to stop federal support for testing in states like Texas just when we need to increase the amount of testing and then trace the people who have the virus.
Now, over a period of about 30 minutes Wednesday afternoon, our affiliate in Myrtle Beach counted 208 people walking by their camera on the boardwalk. Only 4 of them were wearing masks. Now, you can tell people to wear masks, but when it comes down to it, if they don't listen, what can be done to enforce it?
Well, I think enforcing it's very hard. I mean, in an earlier segment, you talked about fines and penalties, but we need to persuade people to wear masks. It's like drunk driving. I hear people say, it's my body, it's my choice. Well, it's not your body, your choice to get loaded up on liquor and get in a car and put other people at risk. A failure to wear masks not only puts you at risk, more importantly, it puts other people at risk. We understand there's a rule against drunk driving. We understand there's a rule against walking into a restaurant with no shoes on and getting other people contaminated and sick. Wearing a mask is the same way. I'll tell you how we could start. The President of the United States could set an example, put a mask on, and encourage other people to do that.
New York City, of course, the first epicenter of this pandemic in the U.S., is now headed toward phase 3 in early July. And certainly we cannot forget that this came with an immense cost in terms of human lives. Does the surge elsewhere now threaten the progress that places like New York and New Jersey have made?
Of course it does. I mean, we saw the amazing announcement yesterday, Lindsay, that New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut are requiring people from a list of states, including Florida and Texas, to quarantine before they come. We have quarantines inside the United States now because we've allowed each state to pursue its own path. Some states have done better, other states have done worse. We're kind of dividing up as a country, and that's really the wrong way to go. We needed a national strategy, national leadership. If the disease rages out of control in places like Florida, Texas, other states in the South and the West, eventually it will climb back up in the states that have done the right things to try to bring under control. We're a unified country. That's what's going to happen if we don't have national leadership and national action on this.
And you talk about national leadership, national action. So is the bottom line here, in your opinion, that a more nationalized strategy is necessary? And what should the federal government be mandating? Testing for everyone?
They should certainly ramp up testing. The goal would be to have every American have testing as often as they need it, and certainly regular testing for people. It's funny, they test everyone every day at the White House. They have federal testing at the White House. Well, if you go to your job, you don't get the same thing. If it's good enough for the people who work at the White House, it should be good enough for people in every workplace in America.
Ron McClain, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Lindsay.
We also thought we'd check in with our friends at 538 for a quick look at how President Trump's coronavirus and also protest response may be affecting his standing in the states that could be certainly key to him winning in November. The president was in one of those states today, Wisconsin. 538's Jeffrey Skelly joins us now. Thanks so much for your time.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So you're out with a piece tonight talking about how Trump's electoral college advantage is slipping. Walk us through what's happening.
Sure. Well, in 2016, President Trump won in the electoral college while narrowly losing the national popular vote. And so there's a general belief that he has sort of this advantage in the electoral college and that that's carrying over into 2020. And it is true that he's performing better on the whole in battleground states than he is in national polls. However, the problem for President Trump is that he's down about 10 percentage points now in our national polling average. But he's also down at least 7 percentage points in big, important states in the electoral college, like Florida, like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. And so basically what's happened is that Joe Biden's lead has grown to the point where even if President Trump does have some sort of advantage, it's basically been neutralized. And so that as long as Biden can keep this sort of lead, it will be very difficult for President Trump, even if he does lose the national popular vote and gets close at all in the electoral college, to actually win.
At 50% in the polls is obviously a key threshold, and it seems at this moment that Biden seems to be getting more than that in some key swing states.
That's exactly right. I think the best way to think about the 50% mark is that Hillary Clinton, in our historical polling average data, never hit the 50% mark once in 2016 in states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. And yet Joe Biden is just over 50% in all three of those states in our polling average. And a part of what's going on here is not only that the environment has proven to be pretty Democratic friendly, President Trump's approval rating has dropped some, Biden's margin has ticked up, but at the same time, Biden finds himself in a position where he has such a large lead that it just may not matter in the end.
You know, obviously, we're still 4 months till Election Day. It would seem like President Trump is in trouble right now. But a lot of people might look back to 2016 and to use a Biden term and say these polls are a bunch of malarkey. I mean, what's different now in 2020 compared to 2016 as far as these polls?
Well, it's interesting. You know, in 2016, the polls weren't that far off at the end of the day nationally, but there were obviously some important swing states where they were off. And that's something we're thinking about now. And that's why the scope of the lead that Biden has is what's particularly notable here. And the fact that he's hitting 50%. Because if he's hitting 50%, it's sort of a signal that there are fewer undecideds in this election. In 2016, we had a lot fewer people totaling up saying they were voting for either Clinton or Trump. And a lot of people said they were voting for a third-party candidate or they were undecided. This time around, there are fewer of those voters out there. So that suggests to us that there's going to be less movement in the polls, or at least there's a chance there'll be less movement. However, you're right. We're 4 months away from Election Day. Things could shift. I think for President Trump's chances of winning re-election, it comes down to can he narrow the margins enough where he's got a shot in a lot of those important battleground states. So even if he does lose in the national popular vote again, he can find a path to winning.
All right, Jeffrey Skelly, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
We turn now to the Supreme Court. After two high-profile setbacks for the Trump administration, first on gay rights, then on DACA, now a big win for the president on immigration. The justices ruled in a 7-2 decision that the administration can now fast-track deportations of asylum seekers whose applications have been rejected. ABC's Devin Dwyer joins us now for more. Devin, why is this ruling so significant?
It's a huge deal, Lindsay. I mean, tens of thousands of immigrants seek asylum in the United States every year. We've seen the lines, people queuing up at embassies around the world, our border entry points. They claim stories of persecution for who they are, what they believe. To get admitted as an asylum seeker in this country, you have to prove that your fear is credible. And the Supreme Court said today in an opinion authored by Justice Sam Alito that the decision of an immigration judge is effectively final. They can't be reviewed in the federal court system. That means the Trump administration can fast-track, expedite the removals of these asylum seekers whose claims are rejected. Critics say it raises the possibility for a mistake to be made, that discrimination could even be introduced into the process, even though this is a big win for Donald Trump today, Lindsay.
And, Devin, these are supposed to be the final days of the Supreme Court's term, which ends June 30th. What's still left to be decided?
Yeah, this is usually the grand finale for the Supreme Court. The final days of June, the justices eyeing those summer vacations in July. Hard to see that happening next week. You're seeing some of these big decisions ahead on your screen. 13 cases still left to be decided, including one on abortion, a major case out of Louisiana, the first abortion decision since President Trump took office. How far can states go to impose abortion restrictions? Big deal there. We also have a case that we're waiting on Obamacare's requirement that insurance companies provide contraceptive services to women at no cost. President Trump wants to be able to exempt companies if they have moral objections from providing those services. And then, of course, the two big cases on the president's tax returns. Will those come out? A lot on the horizon. We'll have to stay tuned next week, Lindsay.
Will we get those tax returns? All right, Devin Dwyer reporting for us from Washington, D.C. Thanks so much, Devin.
Thanks, Lindsay.
And when we come back, as protesters demand change in the wake of George Floyd's death, we take a closer look at the long list of deadly encounters with police and the response from law enforcement. Plus, the first carbon-neutral sports arena in the world, brought to you by Amazon's Jeff Bezos. And after its longest closure since World War II, the Eiffel Tower, it's back open for business. But you might want to think twice before you pack your bags and head over to Paris. More after this break.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Your mom said, comb your hair. Your dad told you, smarten up. Your dog is judging you right now. And your best friend just called you crazy. We all need someone who'll pull no punches and give it to us straight. Now, imagine getting your news like that. No bull, no spin, just give it to me straight. Straightforward news, straight to the heart of the story. ABC News, straightforward.
The Americans here on the ground and the Iraqis, 18,000 tons. Patatas. Ismail? David.
David.
Over ground zero from Hurricane Michael. You can see just home after home. David, nice to meet you. This was your view.
My favorite view.
Thank you very much.
Now, with so much on the line, ABC News, America's #1 news, is right there for you live on Hulu with stories of strength, stories of hope. Because now, when it matters most,
Hulu has live news.
Hulu has live news.
Hulu has live news, and that news is ABC News.
ABC News Live on Hulu.
ABC News Live on Hulu.
Watch the news you need.
Thanks so much for streaming with us.
Streaming to all Hulu subscribers right now.
From inside our homes to your home, now is the time. We all just need each other. And that's why we love starting the day together with you. We'll see you in the morning on ABC's Good Morning America.
Overseas now, where many international hotspots are reopening after locking down for the coronavirus. In the UK, officials have declared a major incident after thousands of people flocked to local beaches in southern England. And one of the world's most popular tourist attractions is welcoming visitors once again. The Eiffel Tower has officially reopened after a 100-day shutdown. But before you pack your bags and grab your beret, it may be a little longer before Americans can enjoy it again. ABC's Maggie Rulli is in Paris with the latest.
The symbolic heart of Paris, like the city itself, returning to life.
This is the iconic Paris view, and for so many people around the world, the Eiffel Tower's reopening is a sign of hope.
Like most of Europe, France was hit hard by the coronavirus, triggering the government to impose one of the strictest lockdowns in the region. Today, as the iconic monument reopened its doors, many told us being here was about much more than just the view.
It's definitely like a case of freedom after having been in lockdown for 8 weeks and not being able to leave our houses. So being able to come up here to the most iconic monument in Paris is just honestly so freeing.
Freedom and hope that it will last. There are strict post-COVID protocols in place, including absolutely no elevators.
To get up there, you have to take the stairs, and there's 674 of them.
I do it again in a heartbeat.
Signs of the pandemic are everywhere. More than 1,300 stickers have been added to encourage social distancing. High-touch areas are cleaned every 2 hours, and all visitors over 11 years old must wear masks. Today's grand reopening is being celebrated as a sign of progress, and it's one Europe is desperate to hold on to. The bloc's considering extending its current ban on visitors from the U.S., citing concerns over America's high case numbers. Welcoming people from countries with rising cases like America is a risk many here in Paris don't want to take.
I worry.
The head of a healthcare union in Paris telling us the government here may not be ready for another surge.
But we don't talk about beds, we don't talk about masks, we don't talk about all the medics we need for second waves.
Many in France say they still fear what they went through in March, with cases spiking, movement restricted, and businesses getting shut down overnight. How shocked were you when you had to close for the pandemic?
I mean, I remember as it was yesterday. It was a Saturday. I was here at the bar, and then somebody called me and said, Prime Minister just said we need to close in 4 hours. First, I thought it was a joke.
Alexandra Stejevok's family owns La Closerie de l'Hélas, a Parisian institution that's been in business since 1878. They've stayed open 7 days a week through world wars and riots, but this pandemic has brought them to their knees. For Alex, he says it's more than food. During the lockdown, French culture was shut down.
It's not a cliche. I mean, I really love to take my coffee with my croissant and reading my newspaper on the terrace. And I don't believe I'm the only one, and it's not cliche. Most of the Parisians are doing this. It's part of our life. So by stopping this, it was a big shock. It's like if you remove a part of yourself or part of your day.
To come back, things had to change. Waiters are in masks and menus are disposable. But the customers are returning, and Alex says so is cafe culture.
Today, we start over, slowly.
To survive, businesses in Paris need to adapt. But they also tell us they need tourists, and what they really need are Americans.
The year 2020 is over for us.
So right now you're normally at full capacity, all 19 rooms are booked. How many are booked tonight?
Tonight, we have 1 room booked.
Wow. Jean-Marie Olliard's grandmother, Claude, owns the Hotel du Val Paris, and he's the manager. The hotel is famous among Americans as a popular haunt for beat poets in the 60s. Today, he says without American tourists, he's not sure what they'll do. How important are American tourists for your business?
Really, really, really important. It's about 80% of our clients.
Wow.
And it's Americans who come back.
They tell us this building has been around since the 1400s, and they have faith it will survive. But they did leave us with this one wish.
Paris is safe. Please come back. We will survive.
So we are going to do everything that we can to appease you so that you can be safe and enjoy Paris. We really, really need you. Please come back.
Maggie Rulli joins us now from Paris. And as of today, that ban on American tourists, it's still in place. Is there any word on when that might be lifted?
Lindsay, we still really have no idea. EU member states met today. They couldn't come up to an agreement on whether or not they're going to ban U.S. travelers, so those meetings are not pushed until tomorrow. The U.S. government says they're in talks with the EU also, that they're very confident they're going to come to some type of compromise and get travel in the books in the next couple of weeks so that Americans can come visit the European Union this summer. But right now, Lindsay, it is all up in the air, but the clock is ticking. We have a deadline. Borders here in Europe are supposed to open by July 1st, so we're really running up against this deadline. People want to know, are they going to be able to travel? And for many Americans that have vacation planned or family living in Europe, they want to know when they can come to this continent. Lindsay, I'm sure you're asking when you can come here to the Eiffel Tower, but you know, some for vacation, some for really important things. So everyone is waiting to see what the EU says and what America says about this.
All right, Maggie Rulli from Paris. Thank you, Maggie. Up next, the news from overseas, the end of a terrible pandemic, just not the one you're probably thinking of. Plus, dead or alive, the check is in the mail. Why the government sent millions of dollars in checks to people who are 6 feet under. But first, our post of the day, Climate Pledge Arena, brought to you by Amazon's Jeff Bezos.
In times like these, the news-making events happen here. ABC News.
President Trump meeting face-to-face with one of the world's most brutal dictators, Kim Jong-un.
The president.
You trust him? I do trust him, yeah. I think he trusts me, and I trust him.
Ivanka Trump.
I have to ask you about your emails. Your father had taken Hillary Clinton to task for this.
There just is no equivalency.
So the idea of lock her up doesn't apply to you?
No.
Comey.
How strange is it for you to sit here and compare the president to a mob boss?
Very strange.
Michelle Obama.
What do you wish you could tell your pre-White House self?
Melania Trump.
Do you think there's still people there that he can't trust?
Yes.
Still working now?
Yes.
Michael Cohen.
So he's still lying?
Yes.
It's a big statement.
And now, in a year with so much on the line, we're right there.
Good evening tonight from Washington, a very busy news night.
America's #1 news source, ABC News, straightforward.
We all need someone who'll pull no punches and give it to us straight. No bull, no spin. Now imagine getting your news like that. Just give it to me straight. ABC News, straightforward.
Another week in America, a country facing a new test now.
The Wuhan airport, almost no one here.
The last flight out of Rome.
This is the nursing home just outside Seattle. Dozens of people were just rushed off this cruise ship.
This is ground zero.
It is shut down.
Another ambulance just pulled out.
Now they're headed to the hospital.
Time is of the essence.
You can see the ship behind me.
This is the first time tests have been done here.
Morning, afternoon, evening, late night, 24/7. ABC News, there for you.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. Start Here, free on Apple Podcasts.
Welcome back, everyone. The more than $2 trillion economic relief package known as the CARES Act, it's meant to help struggling Americans hit hardest by the pandemic. But a watchdog report released today raises serious concerns about just where that money is going. We take a closer look by the numbers. Nearly 1.1 million direct payments from the federal government have gone to dead people. That's according to the Government Accountability Office. Now, these payments total $1.4 billion. The mistake was made because relief payments were based on 2018 and 2019 tax filings, and some of those taxpayers have since passed away. The GAO report said that the IRS and Treasury, quote, moved quickly to disperse 160 million payments to individuals that totaled $269 billion. For millions of Americans, that meant a $1,200 direct payment from the government as the country went on lockdown. In addition, $512 billion in loans have gone to small businesses under the Paycheck Protection Program. Today's report found a lack of oversight for most of these loans and the potential for fraud, abuse, and waste. For example, the Small Business Administration has announced it will not audit loans of less than $2 million, and today's report points out that 79% of PPP loans fall into that category, which represents about $480 billion of taxpayer money. And coming up, Hong Kong's fight for democracy. We hear from some of the voices demanding change as China continues to crack down on dissent beyond its borders. Plus, the Dixie Chicks no more, while the band says it's trying to meet the moment by changing its name. But first, here are some of the trending headlines on abcnews.com.
Seeing right now, this is part of the eye wall.
This procession of migrants goes back 2 miles.
There is going to be catastrophic damage.
This fire has made a run. You can see those flames shooting up into the sky.
We are on the jam-packed red carpet.
To the right, guys.
So this is the 4th weekend of protests.
Watch ABC News on location for Facebook Watch.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. So if you like getting behind the biggest news stories of the day, inside all the details, the backstory, and what will happen next, then listen to Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. It's like no other news podcast out there. Even the critics agree. Listen free on Apple Podcasts.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live, the 24/7 streaming news source from ABC News. Breaking news, live events, streaming nonstop. Original breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, and it's all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want.
ABC News Live.
Streaming everywhere, right to you. ABC News Live. It's that easy to go there.
Today, the coronavirus crisis moving at a dangerously fast pace. Now, at least 29 states seeing a rise in cases, hospitalizations surging in 21. Florida setting its own records with more than 5,500 cases in 24 hours. Long lines stretching for miles at drive-up testing sites in recent days. California with its own surge. Los Angeles County now leads the country with 88,000 people infected.
Success against a virus that scared the world. The health ministry in Congo and the World Health Organization have declared an end to the 2-year outbreak of Ebola. The virus killed more than 2,000 people.
The U.S. economy shrank at a 5% rate in the first quarter and is expected to shrink even more than that in the quarter we're in right now. Also today, the Labor Department says another 1.5 million Americans filed for first-time unemployment benefits last week. That means 48 million people have filled out applications for benefits since the pandemic began.
The book by President Trump's niece, Too Much and Never Enough, How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man, will be coming to a bookstore near you very soon. The president's family has lost its attempt to gag Mary Trump from writing a tell-all book about them. The New York court questioned whether the surrogate court was the proper venue, saying the outcome would not affect Trump Sr.'s estate one iota. The family says Mary Trump violated a non-disclosure agreement she signed when the estate was settled. The decision leaves open the possibility of trying this case in Supreme Court.
The Dixie Chicks will march forward with a new name. The Grammy Award-winning country group has decided to drop Dixie and go simply by The Chicks, saying that they want to, quote, meet the moment. Dixie, of course, is a reference to the southern states that were south of the Mason-Dixon line in the days of the Confederacy. Along with the name change, the trio released a new song called March, March, which addresses youth climate protests, gun violence, and underpaid school teachers, among other issues. The group first caused a stir in the mid-2000s for their criticism of President George W. Bush and the Iraq War.
We turn now to police encounters that have turned deadly. The Colorado governor has just appointed a special prosecutor to investigate the death last year of 23-year-old Elijah McClain, who was stopped by police, put in a chokehold, and like George Floyd and so many others, said those chilling words, "I can't breathe." Here's ABC's Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas.
In the wake of the death of George Floyd, who died after a Minneapolis police officer put his knee on his neck, this controversial police encounter with a young black man in Aurora, Colorado, is getting new attention. Elijah McClain, a 23-year-old massage therapist who loved playing the violin, is dead because of a misunderstanding. It began with this 911 call last August about a suspicious man walking just after 10 p.m. on a Saturday night.
Yeah, I know. He looks sketchy. He might be a good person or a bad person.
McClain, returning from buying iced tea at a corner store, is wearing a mask. His family says because he often got cold since he's anemic.
Do me a favor, stop right there. Hey, stop right there. Stop. 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 I have a right to stop you because you're being suspicious.
In seconds, it escalates. The officer grabs McClain.
Stop tensing up.
No, let go of me.
Stop tensing up.
No, I am an introvert. Please respect the boundaries that I am speaking. Let go of me.
Soon he's surrounded by officers. One applies a carotid control hold, claiming that McClain allegedly reached for one of their guns. McClain pleads, saying that he's different, but that he's nonviolent.
I'm so sorry. I have no gun. I don't do that stuff. I don't do any fighting. The other units are not here. Why were you attacking me?
Clearly in pain, at one point he says the phrase, now infamous.
I can't breathe.
Authorities restrained McClain, and later paramedics gave him a drug, ketamine, to calm him. Authorities say he suffered from cardiac arrest in the ambulance and died days later at a hospital. A coroner declared the manner of death to be undetermined.
There was no call for what they did. There was no reason for them to stop him.
His family calling for an investigation, but the prosecutor maintaining there is no case.
Based on the investigation, we did not feel like we could prove any crime beyond a reasonable doubt based on the officer's actions.
We're joined now by Pierre Thomas. And Pierre, what's next in the Elijah McClain case now that the special prosecutor has been brought in?
Well, you should expect a full review of the case. They'll go through that videotape piece by piece to look at every frame of it. Also, they'll start to investigate and talk to the officers possibly. So this will likely be a full-scale investigation, Lindsay. All
right, Pierre Thomas from the nation's capital. Thanks, Pierre. Well, many Americans have taken to the streets in recent weeks to exercise their freedoms of speech and assembly. A reminder of how democracy is under attack overseas. Mainland China has proposed a sweeping new security law over Hong Kong decades before it agreed it could officially take control of the territory. And just today, the U.S. Senate passed a bill that would strengthen the U.S.'s ability to sanction China in response to the law. So what's next for the people of Hong Kong? Our Ian Pannell reports.
The morning rush hour in Hong Kong. You could be forgiven for thinking life has returned to normal here.
I'm out here distributing flyers for my friend.
But for activists like Joey Hsu, everything is far from business as usual.
We believe that sanctioning from the US and also the other countries could be a very useful way in deterring the suppression from China.
Because while the world was looking the other way, dealing with the pandemic, China moved to strangle the pro-democracy movement. Soon, a new national security law will be imposed in Beijing, overriding local lawmakers and, for activists, turning the one country, two systems policy Hong Kong's built on into one country, one system. China's.
The national security law is going to be implemented in Hong Kong very soon, and we are willing to educate the Hong Kongers about the details of the law and why are we considering that a very dangerous law.
It was June of last year when millions came out in defiance of the controversial extradition bill, the largest protest ever in Hong Kong. We were there on the ground, watching events escalate month after month, until they exploded in violent confrontation between protesters and police around college campuses. The world watched as Hong Kong was engulfed by anger, fearful Beijing would respond with force. But few saw what was really coming. As mainland China and Hong Kong warded off the worst of the current wave of infections and the rest of the world grappled with the pandemic, Beijing made a shock announcement. It decided not to act with direct violence, but a much more ominous threat. A new criminal law for Hong Kong, written unilaterally by Beijing and enacted by decree. The extradition bill last year was scrapped under pressure, but there's no stopping this new law, which could come into effect as early as next week. We still don't have all the details, but what we do know is that it would criminalize and punish acts of secession, subversion and terrorism, in addition to acts of collusion with foreign forces that interfere in Hong Kong, with up to 10 years in prison. Many in Hong Kong believe this law would close down free speech, end the right to protest or even speak out, in short, whatever China deems to be subversive. International condemnation was swift, especially from the Trump administration.
The Chinese government's move against Hong Kong is the latest in a series of measures that are diminishing the city's long-standing and very proud status. This is a tragedy for the people of Hong Kong, the people of China, and indeed the people of the world.
Pro-Beijing politicians say that China had no option after Hong Kong failed to pass its own version of the laws in the years since it returned to China.
They were compelled to do so.
Beijing watched with growing horror as parts of Hong Kong became a battleground, seeing the escalating violence as a direct challenge to its rule and national security threat.
People not only people smashing windows, but laying siege of the Legislative Council, throwing petrol bombs at courts and police headquarters, waving Hong Kong independence flags and singing revolutionary songs, which would amount to subversive or secessionist activity. in many countries, and we have no laws to deal with it. So Beijing came to the conclusion that they have to step into the breach.
Jiyang Fan is a writer with The New Yorker.
I think what you see with the legislation, with the security law, is Beijing saying, to the Hong Kong parliament, you've made a mess of things, and we can't let this drag out for any longer.
I mean, some would say this was inevitable. You can't have one country, two systems when the one country is a single-party, communist, authoritarian state, and that the protesters overplayed their hand.
Yeah, I think that you will always hear that argument coming from essentially, especially from pro-Beijingers, but increasingly I wonder if Beijing ever had another scenario in mind for Hong Kong. What's, I think, particularly unnerving here is that this latest security legislation will allow Beijing to directly control the kind of protests that Hong Kong has, that we've seen in Hong Kong time and again.
And for activists like Joey Hsu, this law makes her likely a target.
And we are now calling for the U.S. Congress to execute the sanctions listed in the act, because we feel like that would be an effective way to deter the suppression from the Chinese Communist Party and also the Hong Kong government officials.
Joey's role has led her to lobby foreign governments for assistance. Under the new act, Joey being in these very meetings could likely be a crime.
I'm very afraid because as listed in the national security law, they are especially targeting those who had been going on for lobbying trips or participating in international advocacies, and they are framing this as being associated with foreign factors. We did not expect the national security law to be coming so quickly. I'm prepared to be arrested, but then to talk about imprisonment, I'm not sure whether I am well prepared for that or not.
At the height of the demonstrations last year, we spoke with a frontline protester who asked to be called Mizu. He was one of those more willing to directly confront authorities. In a mark of the climate of fear here, his face is covered to protect his identity.
I think really independence is the only way. I don't think, for me, I don't think the government will satisfy the 5 demands.
The national security law has brought the protest back onto the streets, but for now, with markedly fewer numbers and a much heavier police presence. Mizu has decided to wait in the wings for the time being.
I think many people have prepared that this kind of days will come, but very few of them had once thought that it will come so early. I think it will just make things more underground. Honestly, I think the national security law mainly affects the people who is, I would say, more peaceful, because they are trying to show their stance.
So long as the law can give sufficient deterrent effect, that could help to restore order and stability in Hong Kong. One country, two systems is a political compromise. In a way, it is a contract between the central authorities and us to maintain our special status in our nation. It is in our interest to be able to protect the country. Otherwise, the rest of the nation won't be willing to give us our separate treatment.
So we now have these two diametrically opposed visions, narratives of what the national security legislation will mean for Hong Kong. On the one hand, Hong Kong becomes just another Chinese city, and you have Beijing's narrative that it has to assert control, but that one country, two systems lives on.
Clearly, Beijing very shrewdly wants to keep up the perception that it is a humane ruler and that it will keep to its promise. What Hong Kong protesters told me and again was they wanted a sense of being able to determine their own fate. They wanted the rule of law to be protected.
But for now, there is still hope. But battles surely coming for the future of Hong Kong.
I don't feel like this will completely kill our movement. And I believe that Hong Kongers are creative and smart enough to make an underground, or I believe that would be one of the ways to sustain our movement. We'll be fighting until our last breath before the implementation of the national security law.
Ian Pannell, ABC News, London.
Fighting until their last breath. Our thanks to Ian for that. And when we come back, the Starbucks barista who refused to serve a customer not wearing a mask after she tried to shame him, the surprising response he received on social media. Stay with us.
From inside our homes to your home, now is the time. We all just need each other. And that's why we love starting the day together with you. We'll see you in the morning on ABC's Good Morning America.
Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner of 4 Edward R. Murrow Awards, including the most prestigious honor, Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news choice. This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live, the 24/7 streaming news source from ABC News. Breaking news, live events, streaming nonstop. Original breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, and it's all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want.
ABC News Live.
Streaming everywhere, right to you.
ABC News Live. It's that easy to go there. Now, with so much on the line, ABC News, America's #1 news, is right there for you live on Hulu with stories of strength, stories of hope. Because now, when it matters most,
Hulu has live news.
Hulu has live news. Hulu has live news. And that news is ABC News.
ABC News Live on Hulu. ABC News Live on Hulu.
watch the news you need.
Thanks so much for streaming with us.
Streaming to all Hulu subscribers right now. ABC News, America's #1 news source. Straightforward news, straight to the heart of the story. ABC News, straightforward.
Vince Carter with his first stop. Hey, that is a reverse 360 going against the grain. That is unbelievable. This building just exploded and perfect on the scoreboard.
Look at that. That was a throwback to Vince Carter's first dunk in the 2000 NBA Slam Dunk Contest. He would take home the title that year and go down as arguably the greatest dunker of all time. Carter announced his retirement today after 22 seasons in the league, holding the honor of being the only man to play in the NBA in 4 different decades. Our hats off to him. And a woman in San Diego was asked to leave a Starbucks by a barista for not wearing a mask when she tried to let off some steam through a Facebook post targeting the employee. It all backfired, and thousands rallied behind the barista instead. Our affiliate station KGTV has that story.
It started when a woman posted a message on Facebook with a photo of a young Starbucks employee. Meet Lennon from Starbucks who refused to serve me because I'm not wearing a mask. Next time I will wait for cops and bring a medical exemption. Hundreds of thousands of interactions later, and many people are chiming in. Some defending the barista, one person asking why a person with a medical issue would go inside. San Diego does have a clause in the mask requirement saying you don't have to wear one if you have a health condition that prevents you from covering your face. A spokesperson for the county says there are no rules requiring those people to provide proof, and it's up to businesses to enforce that policy. Also noting that people with health problems should not go in public. Many of the responses online are supporting the young employee, Lennon, saying they want to leave him a tip. So one man stepped in to help, making a GoFundMe.
I set it at $1,000 thinking like that was a reach. Like we would be lucky if we hit like $250. And when we hit $100, I was kind of overwhelmed by that.
The number climbing quickly by the thousands as people show their support for the young barista.
Here was somebody who was just trying to do their job and everybody is rallying around somebody for doing what they're supposed to do and trying to protect everyone else. Like, it just goes to show you that there's a lot of good people out there, and that outweighs all the bad.
Lennon shared this photo, saying thank you to everyone for the tips. Stay safe.
Stay safe to all of us. And before we go tonight, the image of the day. This is one way to clean up the popcorn. Cinemark Theaters gave this employee named Mark a shout out on Twitter for sanitizing the auditorium seats before each movie in West Plano, Texas. Cinemark is encouraging moviegoers to wear masks, but is deferring to local guidelines as to whether they're required. Our thanks to Mark and all of the workers out there keeping us safe and healthy during this time. And that is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us, and good night.
What you need to know right now.